Thanks everyone for hanging out for the before lunch, after the conference dinner session, and I'm sure everyone's wide awake, so appreciate you being here. As Leo gave the introduction, I work at UC Santa Barbara, but I've been confusing everyone because it says UC Santa Barbara, Australia. There isn't a UC Santa Barbara division in Australia, unless you consider my granny flat the division. So I work remotely for the university in Brisbane. But I want to acknowledge that I work with not just people in my lab, but a huge variety of people. The work we do is funded by the Waite Institute, which is a philanthropic organization, but they also do a lot of on-the-ground work. And there's just some of the logos of the people we work with. So we work with governments in Bermuda, the Maldives, and a whole bunch of other places. And I'll show a map in just a second. And also, it's a very tech-heavy conference, so I'll acknowledge Jeff Hansen, who is kind of my guru. So kind of worship Jeff, as he's the creator of one of the R packages that I use a lot. So where do we work? That's the outlay. It's all small islands, small tropical islands around the world. And my work's focused on fisheries management and particularly marine spatial management, which I'll explain more about. So what's the problem that I'm trying to help get a solution to? Basically, as humans, we're consuming more of everything, and that includes the ocean. We're using up, we're expanding further into the ocean. We're fishing deeper and deeper, and basically the whole ocean is now fished. But also we're developing more things that go into the ocean. So there's wind farms, we've got aquaculture in the bottom left panel, those are aquaculture pens. Most of those have traditionally been along the coast, but they're now looking to develop ones that go out into deep water. And of course there's oil platforms which have been around a long time. There's also deep sea mining. There's no commercial deep sea mining at the moment, but they're looking to do it in the near future. So a solution, note I say a solution because this is not the overarching solution to solve everything. I think most problems require many solutions. We also work on fisheries management, but marine spatial planning is what I'm going to be talking about. And this is just simply, where should you allow stuff to happen in the ocean? We do this on land. We say, okay, this area is going to be for houses, this area is going to be for industry. You don't want the two generally being right next to each other. Same in the ocean. If you're doing trawling for shrimp, you generally don't want to do that on a coral reef because you're going to destroy it. So this is just a map for a small section of the Great Barrier Reef, just showing you some of the zones that exist. The pink one, the preservation zone, is the most highly protected, and then the other ones have slightly lower levels of protection. And the marine spatial planning, I'm going to be talking about the mapping process, so that bit in the middle, the marine spatial plan development, making maps, and particularly the process of designating marine protected areas. So where should you not be allowed to do most things? It's basically a marine protected area. But it's part of a bigger process. There's policy engagement, there's stakeholder engagement. We don't just develop a plan and say, right, you can't fish here. Obviously, the Waite Institute and myself, we talk with all the stakeholders, and that feedback goes into the plan. So I come from an ecology, kind of marine science, conservation background, so my knowledge is more about marine protected areas, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that and go into the mapping as well. So this is just telling you how would you want to create an MPA? Well, we have some basic principles for that in ecology. Connectivity, the CARE principles, connectivity, adequacy, representation, and efficiency. So connectivity, we want to have areas that, fish are spawning in one area and then they go out onto the reef. We need those areas connected so that the whole area is protected. Adequacy, we need to make sure there's enough protected that animals have space to live. We need representativity, so not just we're protecting the rhino or whatever it is, there's also all the other animals that you might want to protect. And efficiency, and this is a key one. We have limited space, and so we need to we can't just say, okay, we're going to protect everything in the ocean because that's going to piss off a lot of people, particularly fishermen who've been fishing there and rightly want to continue fishing. So we want to do protection, but do it efficiently, so using the smallest space we can. So how does this work in practice? So I'm going to go through a little cartoon example and then talk about the way we do it using the tools we use. So how do we protect all these species? So I've got 3 species up here, the little yellowfish, a coral trout, probably the red one, and a starfish. So the first thing we go about doing is we grid the space. So I've just broken it up into 9 grid cells there. And then you want to protect an area. So remember, we want to represent all our species. So I've chosen 3 cells. I've got all my species. That's great. There could be another way of doing it, though, because that's not very efficient. Remember, we want to do it efficiently, use smallest space possible. So if I do it like this, I've still got my 3 species, but I've got only 2 squares. So I'm more efficient. And how about connectedness? So if I do that, the cells are now, the squares I've chosen are connected. So that's kind of one of the optimal solutions, if you like, here. Now, imagine you're going to do that, not with just 3 species and 9 cells, but often we've got hundreds of thousands of cells because you want to break your ocean area up. And you're not going to be doing it in like 50-kilometer grid cells. You're going to be doing it in something like, depending on the area, I work in perhaps 2-kilometer, and if it's very near shore, I might work even 100-meter square cells. So you've got thousands or tens of thousands of cells and potentially hundreds of species you have information for. As you're probably thinking, that's a kind of computing problem. So we have a special suite of tools for this, prioritization tools that help us make those decisions about what areas to protect. And if you come in from a GIS world, which most people are, things like multi-criteria decision analysis tools, something kind of similar. It's basically taking a bunch of data and making a decision from that. I want to recognize that there's more than one way to skin a cat, so there's a lot of tools out there that do similar things. There's Marksan, a lot of people have been using for a long time. This is one of the first pieces of software that helped. And there's actually a QGIS plugin for this. So if you're a QGIS user, you can go and use that. There's another program called Zonation. The one I'm going to be talking about principally today is an R package. So I use the R coding environment, and I use the package prioritizr. So this is very similar to Marksan, but it's faster, more flexible, and it's really regularly updated. And it allows, I do everything in R, so it just allows for that reproducible workflow. And everything I'm talking about is going to be free and open source. So, after this, you can go away and download it all and have a go. So I'm going to give an example of a prioritization we did in real life. And just first, what do we actually need to do the prioritization? So I've kind of mentioned that. We're often looking at what species we want to protect. So you might have species distribution maps. Probably some people in the room might do species distribution modeling. We also have habitat maps. There's been people talking about the shoreline, coastlines. So we have maps of mangroves. You've got maps of coral reefs. You've got maps of seagrass. And any other biodiversity features. And then for each of those, you have to set a target. So how much do you want to protect? And that tends to be more a policy kind of decision. So often there's a target of 30% globally. There's a target to protect 30% of our oceans. So that's often where those targets come from, these global agreements. And the other part we need is something called cost. So I said we want to do this efficiently. We want to avoid taking too much area. And especially we want to avoid taking areas which are going to be really important to people for, say, fishing. So we often get information on where people are fishing and then try and avoid the areas where it's most intensive or it's most done. So the example I'm going to give is from Bermuda. So just a little tiny bit of background, I guess. So Bermuda is in the Caribbean, or kind of hanging out in the Atlantic, but it's considered part of the Caribbean there. It's a tiny, tiny little island. The black bit that you see in the middle there is the Bermuda Island, and the red dotted line around it, the circle, is its exclusive economic zone. So that's the water it has jurisdiction over. And the depths go in from light down to darker colors, so the darker colors being deeper. You can see in the northeast, there's a chain of seamounts, which I'll come back to in a bit. So how do we do this process in practice? So what we're trying to get is what you see on the left there, a map of priority areas for protection. So the green is the stuff that's come out of the program, and it said, these are the best areas to protect to meet our objectives. So what do we need to get to that point? Well, we need the features I talked about. So in Bermuda, the problem with the deep ocean, the offshore areas of the ocean, is that we don't really have a lot of information about them. It's not very easy to go out and count fish. Shallow waters, people are doing coral reef surveys. Deep waters, you can do some surveys, but it's expensive and time-consuming. So we often use proxies. So we say, okay, we know fish tend to aggregate and biodiversity tends to aggregate around seamounts. So we'll try and protect some of the world's seamounts. We'll try and protect some different depth zones, because you get fish in different depth zones or different species in different depth zones, and other features that we have information on. Most of those are geographical features. So that's the key part. The other key part is, as I said, some kind of cost. So what are we trying to avoid impacting? We're trying to, in this case, we used fisheries data, and I'll talk about how we got that in just a second. And then I run this all through prioritizr, and we get out the image you see on the left there. So that's what we can then take to people and say, look, if these are the goals you're trying to reach, if you're trying to protect these things, and you're trying to avoid impacting your fishing, these are the best areas to protect, put in a marine protected area. The countries that I'm working with, we work in, are, as I said, small island nations. So it's been really amazing to see the quantity and variety of data coming from countries like Australia, but I have not even a fraction of that in a lot of the places I've worked. So we often have to go out and get data, and that we do, well, the Waite Institute runs ocean use surveys. So these are geospatial surveys. They go out, get people to circle areas on a map where they fish, and then they fill out information about what types of fish what types of activities they're doing in the ocean. And so that's all done in an online platform called SeaSketch. So if you go to seasketch.org, you'll actually see there's a whole bunch of projects there. And the SeaSketch team are also based at University of California in Santa Barbara. And they basically spin up a new application, a new website for each site we need. It's a pretty handy platform. It does not just visualization, but it does that has that sketching ability I talked about. You can do entire surveys in it. And then it also has some analytical capabilities. So you can see there it's actually showing you someone's drawn a box, and it shows you how much of certain features are in that box. And so what does the plan go on? So I've given you the computer output. I think there's a lot of people have been talking about computer outputs, but what does that mean in real life? How does that influence anything? So that's on the left there, you're seeing the output I just showed. So that was our map of what we said the green areas should be priority areas. And so this is the current draft plan for Bermuda. This is from the official Bermuda Ocean Prosperity Plan. And you can see that they correlate pretty closely. So the dark blue is areas that are proposed to be fully protected. And so they overlap. They're just pretty good overlap with the areas that we came out with from the prioritization. Obviously, they've had to straighten things out. That's just for practicality of enforcement. And then the smaller area that's a little hatched square there, that's one of the seamounts, which they said we'd still like to be able to do some fishing on, so it has slightly lower protections. And that's the plan that's going through consultation at the moment. So that's how we do it, and I'd just like to emphasize that the part I'm talking about is really just one part of the process. I do some mapping, I do some work with stakeholders trying to redevelop plans and go through many iterations of that, but it's part of a political process, so now that's all off with a kind of higher level group that are consulting, and then that might come back to us. Well, in fact, I found out yesterday it has come back to us. So scaling up. So I've given you one example of the countries, one of the countries that we work in, but we're trying to do that in quite a few countries. So like everybody here, I was trying to think about, well, how can we do this without having to repeat too much? For me, that basically means I do quite a bit of coding to do this, and I just wanted to make that a little bit simpler. So I just built some little R packages with my colleagues. So these just helping us just simplifying some of the functions. I mean, the nice thing about R, I'm not really a code-heavy person. There's some amazing coding people in this room, but these packages are just functions and data packaged up. That means I don't have to go to a new site and start like finding the data, writing a whole bunch of new code. I can just pull in these functions. And so the example here is the spatial gridder package we created. There's a function getBoundary, so I've pulled down the ocean boundary for Samoa. There's another function getGrid, and then I just say getData in grid, and it grids me the data. So it's just making my life easier. All this is available on GitHub, so if you go to the website, you can get it, and then you can send me issues and complain about how rubbish it is. There's also a second package. We wanted the data available. Most of the data we're using is free and open source anyway. It's just, I'm going to multiple different sites, so I just wanted it all in one place. And again, we've got a simple function, getFeatures, that basically pulls down a whole bunch of data that I'm using the same time after time, and I can just run that simple function. And it just means the whole thing is reproducible, it's all open, so if, I mean, my ideal, it would be that the people in the countries that we're helping to do this can take this away and run this if they want to. I realize often that's not, just practically possible, but it is a possibility. And one thing I do a lot of is run many scenarios. So I get the data, I run this prioritization, I get a map of these priority areas, and then I use R Markdown, that's the package we use, that just produces a PDF report. It's a nice little, or HTML, whatever you want. But often we're doing that multiple times. So someone will say, yeah, but what if you tweak this? I don't want 20%, I want 30%. I don't want 50% of this, I want 30%. So I'm running, I think in Bermuda, I run well over 100 different scenarios, and you send in PDFs all the time. So working with some colleagues at the University of Queensland, they were already doing some prioritization work, and they've basically put together a Shiny app. So Shiny in R basically allows you to have an interactive website. So that's a screenshot of the website that they developed for the Weddell Sea project in Antarctica. They were looking to exploring the potential protected areas there. So that allows you to do that playing around with features that I was mentioning. You can move sliders and say, I want 30%, 40%, and it's interactive, real time. The user can see how it changes. And they have made a couple of packages, Spatial Planner and Shiny Planner, to just help with all those repetitive operations. And then if you're going, you don't want to do the Weddell Sea, you want to do wherever we're going to next, that just allows you to spin up that website really quickly. So basically, we've got this nice little ecosystem of free, openly available R packages, and all of this is helping us do the prioritization quicker and more efficiently. I just wanted to finish saying, so where am I actually working right now? We were working in Micronesia, we've been there for quite a while, been doing the offshore prioritization, trying to think about where to put marine protected areas in the offshore. The tiny little red dot, which has COSRI written next to it, is one of the islands in Micronesia. So we're doing some near-shore planning there. That's a challenge, a data challenge particularly. We're going to be starting some work in Fiji. And as I mentioned, we've already done lots of work in Bermuda. And I thought my work in Bermuda was done, but as I said, the consultation just came back to us and they said there's going to be some changes. So the work is not done. I'm excited about that. So just to summarize, marine spatial planning, I think hopefully I've shown you, it can help protect biodiversity and reduce spatial conflict. These prioritization results, it's not just theory. We're putting them into practice. We're working with people on the ground. And I think, as everyone knows, a map really helps. You show someone a map and they're like, oh, okay, that's the area that should be protected. So it's had really, I think, good results. And these open source R packages that we're creating, available to anyone. You can go away, download them. And I think that's the nice thing about R. It's very, I'm not, as I said, not a really highly technical person, but it's you can get into it relatively easily, and the packages allow you to package up stuff you're using. So if you do use R and you're doing a lot of repetitive stuff, I'd encourage you to look into packaging some stuff up and making it available to people. That's it. If anyone's got any questions, you can contact me, or if we've got a few minutes.
Yes, we have time for a few questions. Any takers? Yes.
Thank you for the talk. I was just curious about how do you discriminate different species in the water to pretty much prioritize?
Yeah, so that's kind of, well, it depends on two things. One, do you have any data on the species you're interested in? Often, at the scales we're working at, particularly in the offshore, like deeper ocean, we have very limited data. So you might not even be able to say which species you want to protect. It's more about, like I said, we're going to protect seamounts because we know there's going to be a bunch of fish aggregating around that, and that's important. When you do have data on species, then the question of how much to protect is more of a political question. I can help inform that, and I say, well, you probably want 30% as a minimum, because that's global targets. There's a lot of science has said 30% is probably a good minimum. And particularly if the species is endangered, you probably want to set a higher target. But ultimately, that decision about how much to protect has to be more of a conversation that happens in country. And we work with a steering committee in the country that helps inform those targets. So I'm grateful to say that it's not resting on my shoulders.
Any other questions? Well, I have one, if you don't mind. I'm curious about the different protection levels that there are. Because from what I understood, you're just suggesting which areas to protect, but you don't have a voice in how strictly should it be protected?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because we're at the moment we just say, okay, these are the best areas to protect, and then often people go away with the plans, and again, that becomes more of a local and often political decision about, okay, well, yeah, this bit is far away from anyone fishing. We'll give that full protection is the truth of the matter most of the time. And then if it's an area which is quite contentious, there's a lot of people doing activities there, particularly fishing, they might say, okay, we'll give this some partial protections, but it's going to be too damaging politically to give that full protection. And I think it surprised me when I was looking at the Great Barrier Reef that a lot of the Great Barrier Reef has only very modest protection. So areas that you'd think, oh, Great Barrier Reef, it's marine protected area, it's fully protected now. There's tons of fishing going on there. It's just restricted to some extent.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.